Okay, I will now call this special council meeting to order. And I'll start with the land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all as Treaty people live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. And I'd like to welcome Chatsworth here with us. Thank you for being here, making that drive. We'll start with approval of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Does anyone have any additions to it before we approve it? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and a seconder. Mayor Mackey, Deputy Mayor McKay, and I'll call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. So first item is CAO 2025-01, full decommissioning of biodigester and site rehabilitation. And the clerk would like me to read all this, wouldn't she? The recommendation is that staff be directed to engage Aqua on a sole source basis for preparing a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, and that the joint councils recommend to the BioGrid board that $50,000 be allocated from the future capital reserve held by each municipality to the 2025 budget for the completion by Aqua and their subconsultants of a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan that considers options for both full and partial decommissioning and site rehabilitation, and that through the development of a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, a detailed review of the existing licenses and regulatory approvals on the property is completed to inform if there is potential alternative uses for the property under said licenses, and that staff be directed to explore through the decommissioning plan potential alternative uses for the site and assets associated with the biodigester and under the existing approved and licensed uses, and that staff be directed to bring before the joint council prior to budget 2026 processes a recommended approach to decommissioning. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scholz.
Councillor Whitten.
Thank you. That's not the name I was getting, so my apologies, Peter.
We call them different.
And I will turn this over to our CAOs.
So thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you, members of councils. Thank you ever so much for the meeting this evening. So this is a conversation largely by yourselves rather than us. You have the report in front of you. We are recommending moving forward with engaging consulting expertise to help us with a full site rehabilitation, full decommissioning and site rehabilitation for the jointly owned assets down at the biodigester. If you remember back last year, we did an RFP. The RFP was to seek an alternative operator for the site, and the basis of that RFP came back with just one interested vendor, and the direction of the joint councils was not to move forward at that point in time, and that staff bring back some further information about what decommissioning might look like. This has taken a little longer than I think we had anticipated last year, and I apologise for that, but this is that next step towards looking for either an alternative use of the site under the existing licences, but the removal of the biodigesters' assets prior to them becoming liabilities, really. And so that's where we sit today. So I think Mr. Norman and myself would be more than happy to take any questions that might arise and look forward to the conversation.
Deputy Mayor Mann.
Yes,
Okay.
through you, Chair. As bad as it comes. We had a GHD do a our decommissioning plan. And it's not, I know it wasn't full decommissioning maybe, but can we not go by what they said to start with anyway? And then with OCWA, they could maybe consult them or vice versa, like work together, because haven't we already spent so much money on that part? I haven't seen any results.
So through you, Chair Carlton, Mayor Carlton? Mayor Carlton, otherwise I'm going to get it wrong anyway. So through you, Mayor Carlton, yes, the intention would be very much to build on the GHD report. So Aqua have the GHD report, and they use the GHD report to help inform the partial decommissioning that was completed, I believe, in 2021 to winterize the facility. So at the back of the report, there was an Excel spreadsheet which shows the steps of the GHD report that were completed towards that partial decommission. The GHD report was not a full decommissioning plan, nor was it a site rehabilitation plan. And so the proposal that Aqua have put towards together to support this conversation builds on the GHD plan, will indeed rely on Aqua securing some subcontractors and subconsultants to support them through the work. So they recognise that they don't have all the skills that are required for all the work to be completed, and so they will be relying on the GHD report. They will also be relying on other trades to be able to do this piece of work. So the whole body of work is not just going to be done by Aqua, but the intention would be that they would engage the expertise they need to help inform that full plan. So it would be the GHD plus.
Just to follow with that, hadn't we decided, it's been over a year, hasn't it, since our last meeting, or quite a while? We were going to get whoever's has know how to know what equipment's in there and what it's worth. Are we going to do that through this consultant company? They're going to tell us, like, we should be able to get rid of any equipment type thing. And then who puts the price on it? That, like, there's a big, generator in there that's likely worth thousands. I guess it's still worth. Like, who tells us how much it's worth, or do they? Or do we get a consultant to figure out how much our equipment's worth?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the intent in this work would be the assets that remain on site. Those things with value would be quantified and an estimated value placed on those for what they could be secured. As you say, there's a number of items on site which almost certainly have value, even if their value is only a scrap. And there are probably things on there which have got value much more significant than they would for scrap. And so, yes, there would be an estimated value placed upon that as part of this work.
Never mind.
No button to hit.
They're up here. They're in the ceiling now.
Perfect. Then I won't screw it up.
Yep.
Thank you. And through you, I'm not sure who the question should be directed at. It has to do with the timelines. They've, I think, got August 5th in the Aqua report that the final report would be done. I'm wondering, one, is there an opportunity to move those timelines up? This has been, Carly mentioned about an open wound. I mean, this is one, having this meeting, taking the scab off. It has been a long time, and we've not moved ahead. My recollection of the last meeting, there was kind of unanimous support from both councils that we do decommission this. I think that question's been answered. I mean, there's some question in the report whether or not that question was answered. In my mind, it was answered. We do want to move to the decommissioning. So now August is quite a piece up. Is there any opportunity to move those timelines ahead a little bit? And would there be any penalties if they're not able to make the timelines that they give us?
CEO Cinnamon.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. So those dates, Mayor Mackey, are from the report from Aqua, but those are referring to 2024 dates. I think we can go back if the direction is to move forward with Aqua. We can go back and get an updated Gantt chart And certainly, I think it would be probably prudent for council to set a date as to when you expect it to come back to you. And perhaps, with construction projects, we often have penalties in there if they don't meet that date, and, that certainly can be open for discussion as well.
Go ahead.
I think it's important for both municipalities to make sure that this is moving forward. We're wasting money right now on this facility to no one's benefit. So we have to bring it to a conclusion. And I think there needs to be some hard set dates put in place for everyone's benefit.
Councilor Craig, did you have your hand up?
I'll just hold it for now.
Okay. Councilor Winters?
So actually, thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I mean, the proposal from Aqua was dated 2024. Are we assuming that that price is still valid in 2025? That's my first question. Second question is question statement, looking for consensus maybe. I think we all agree that the biodigester is done and it should be decommissioned. When we set up to do a decommissioning report, if we just say, here you go, consultant, run wild with this and see what it comes back, or do we as a group of joint council have an idea of what we think that decommissioning of that site looks like? I did make a call today, and I phoned a couple of different people in the industry that do with biosolids and liquid manure and those kind of things. And their response to me was, there are assets there that are valuable. There is revenue there now that can be realized. You have an asset that has concrete storage tanks, and you have an asset that has approval from the ministry to store those materials. And he said, don't lose sight of that. There are dollar values associated with that. So when we talk about this full decommissioning, I'm alarmed. I don't see that place being built back like a park. I think that's a waste of taxpayers' money. I really think it's decommissioning. Let's get rid of the biodigester. Let's get rid of the generator, get rid of the control panels, the electrical, and look at what storage opportunities are there. And how fast can we start to realize some of the revenue from these storage opportunities? From what I understand is they're right there now, wanting to sign a deal and say, let's come together. So if we're going to waste time in my mindset, okay, let's hire a consultant, and Aqua's good, no disrespect. Let's wait until February or August when they come back with a report and say, oh, they recommended we should look at concrete storage tanks and realize some revenue. Well, guess what? Another 6 months is gone. When I sat down and read this report, I went, great. That was a year ago. We've wasted a year. This facility is bleeding money, but there is potential for revenue. And I think tonight I was hoping that by talking like this, we can get a consensus that, yes, the decommissioning is of the generation station and the gas production, but let's look at ways to realize revenue from the storage facilities that exist. And let's streamline it. Let's give our consultants something to focus on. And hopefully at the end of the year, we're saying to our ratepayers, we brought some revenue into this facility.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Council Winters. So I think we're quite well aligned on this is useful because it shows we've headed in the right direction here. So to the first one, to the pricing, Aqua have reviewed this and are comfortable that the pricing that they provided is, broadly speaking, still accurate. They need to tweak the numbers, and we have allowed for a bit of contingency in the 50,000 that we're seeking to be able to move forward with this quickly. In terms of timelines, assuming the timelines that Aqua presented last year are still accurate, that's about 12 weeks in total. So that should put us, if we were to get the go-ahead this evening, that could put us in a report back in late April, early May. In terms of scope of project, the very point of this is to take the perspective of full decommissioning, taking the site back to how it was before we put a biodigester on there, and to what might be logical stopping points on the way, such as the removal of certain assets, but the retention of ones which perhaps still have value. We have been approached by one of the we are aware that there is some potential commercial interest on the site. We haven't had the time to understand what that looks like or what that might look like for bringing back to the board, but that's definitely also something which is embedded into this, is examining the licenses, examining the extent to which those licenses might be able to put to a secondary use, because those licenses have value in their own right, and so we want to explore that as well. So the price is roughly is going to be in the ballpark of what you see in front of you, definitely within the 50,000. The timeline, about 12 weeks, and yes, full decommissioning is one end of the spectrum, but we'll have multiple stops on the way that the joint councils can consider.
That's great.
Carlton. Makes some good points there. I don't think we'd want to lose any assets just through a full decommissioning. It sounds like it has certainly lived its life for how long we wanted. Anyway, GHD had already given us a decommissioning plan with costing. I keep hearing Aqua over and over and over again. I would ask why we wouldn't include GHD, at least get a costing out of them. They've already given us the costing is. They've been great to work with over the years. They know the facility fairly well. I would ask, or perhaps suggest a quote from them also on this, rather than just sticking constantly with Aqua. Is that a possibility that we could reach out and maybe possibly get a tender through them, or at least a cost proposal? Because they've already done some of it, they're familiar with it. Why not finish it up? We've already paid for it. This $50,000 from each council, like yet again. So bleeding more money is a concern to me. We already have the information, or GHD's been part of this. Why wouldn't we bring them back into the fold?
Good point. I will turn to you, Lovely.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, for clarity on the cost, it's 50,000 total, so it's 25,000. It's 50,000. There is a shared reserve, which you'd be paying into, so the intent would be to take 25,000 out of that reserve that each council holds to pay for this. The reason that we're recommending sole source at this point in time is purely a matter of speed. It's to get this work out the door quicker, sooner rather than later. Assuming we were to use our purchasing policy, the township purchasing policy, this is above the limits that we would have the ability to go without coming back to councils. So we need to come back. We would go for a quote. We need to have a joint council meeting once more to get the authority to move forward with that, because we don't have the ability to go for a single bid on a body of work like this. The alternative would be to go through an RFP process to secure the expertise to do this work. Again, it just adds time to it. So this isn't ignoring the GHD work, and it's not meant in any way, shape or form to push them to one side. It's because Aqua are on site. We already have an existing contractual relationship with them, and that's why we went with Aqua for the pricing. But we would be more than able to direct. We went out to RFP to see if this is a competitive price and to secure an alternative. There's no reason that this work needs to go to Aqua. It could go to one of multiple firms.
Thank you. Well, I just see the familiarity with GHD. It's not like we're bringing in a whole new company. So I would certainly consider them as part of this conversation because they are familiar with it and their timelines may be quicker. They have a file with us. So I'll bring in somebody green. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, just to follow up on that then, so since you've already been working with this company and you said if we got it out, they could get it back to us in 12 weeks. Since this company already has a lot of the information, maybe it's a pipe dream, but I was thinking if we could have it back by the last Monday in February, that's about 6 weeks roughly. Maybe it's too soon. I don't know, maybe it's just a pipe dream. But as our mayor said, that would really keep it rolling if we could do it in 6 weeks. But maybe it's a pipe dream. But I mean, if this company already has a lot of the information, they might say, yeah, we can get it back.
So to you, Mayor Carlton, I'll make a brief comment, but I'm going to rely on our joint treasurers to help me out here before so we've got a proposal in front of us that we've obtained. There is no other proposal at this point in time. And so I don't think you'd be able to give us direction to go for another company for sole source without us at least getting a quote from them and then having to bring that back. So I think to get another, if we were to be requested to go for another sole source to seek one quote from GHD as a competitive, I think we would have to bring that back to the joint councils again. So there would be a period of time that would take. I would anticipate that we would be able to get a quote from them in relatively short order, but then it would be the scheduling issue. It's proven a little challenging at times to get the shed run. It's a large body to get the shed run.
Before I go to Councillor Colburn, I just have a quick question. Is the reason for having gone with Aqua for this the fact that they are in there looking after the facility at this point? So that was, okay, that just confirmed for me. Councillor Colburn.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. I just wanted to reiterate some of the points that have been made in the spirit of supporting faster timelines. If the analogy is ripping off a Band-Aid, this is the most slowly ripped off Band-Aid I've ever experienced in my life. And it's painful. So I support anything we can do to move the timelines along faster. I had very similar questions about single sourcing with Aqua, not that they haven't and continue to do a good job. I guess my question is for the board, when you directed staff to get a quote and move forward with this, did you request that we put a tender out, or was it just asked that we get this one proposal from Aqua?
No, the board hasn't met on this. So there hasn't been a direction from the board on that.
Okay, thank you. I just made the assumption that this was under direction of the board.
No. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Carlton. I believe there was a resolution passed though our last joint meeting. I don't have the wording of it in front of me, but I believe it was directing staff to do what we're looking at today, but does anyone have that available?
Sorry, Mayor Carlton, through you, I don't mean to delay this process. I was just curious to know if there had been some direction given from the board. Clearly, there wasn't, or we would have maybe seen more tenders. I do wonder if we have any of the expertise in-house to take over some of the project management duties to cut down on some of the costs as well. I understand there needs to be engineering input and designs, but when I read this report, it seemed to me that Aqua was doing some of the work, but also sourcing out some of the work. And I just wondered if there would be some cost savings if we had staff that could project manage this one.
Yeah, I think staff are looking for the direction for the last minutes. Councillor Winters, did you have?
Yeah, I'm just going to say under the analysis section of this report, it says staff have been asked by the joint councils and BioGS report to investigate a report of the next steps. So somewhere along the lines, there was some direction given.
And I think that's where we're at, is those next steps. That's why we're together at this meeting.
If I may, just to keep the dialogue going when staff's doing what they do. When I get down to the $2 to $2.5 million to decommission a facility, that didn't sit well with me, because we can sit there and do nothing at a zero cost. That can all rot in the ground and not cost us anything. That alarmed me of where that dollar value came from. There was a comment about the generator. I mean, there's a generator that's been sitting in a shipping container for 4 years, hasn't run in the last 3 years. What's the value of it? I wouldn't suggest it's a very worthwhile exercise. A lot of your electrical components, motors and stuff, will be the value of whatever scrap is. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, Georgian Bluffs just went through a scrap steel surplus exercise, and for the amount of staff time that they got for having 65 ton of scrap material, it was about a $3,500 return. So we're sitting here talking, lots of money for studies, lots of money for moving forward for decommissioning. There are certain things that need to be investigated here as far as licensing and things like that. I get that part of it. But when it comes down to it and we get a $50,000 report that says, yeah, it's going to cost you $2.5 million to dig this stuff out of the ground, I know what most of our decisions will be. It was a waste of $50,000 because it's staying in the ground at a $2.5 million. The facility has bled us to death. We're here today because of that. And there's got to be some options to start receiving some of that revenue that's available. And is that in the interim when we're doing the study, is that reaching out to these private individuals and companies that have shown some sort of interest, saying, get your proposals rolling, let's see what they are. Again, the Band-Aid's half off, let's pull it off, let's decide where we're headed with it.
Councillor Scholler.
I'd like to just reiterate some points that have been resonating with me just in the conversation we were having on the table. I like Councillor Great, right? Is it great? Yeah, about not just single sourcing, and if we have to go back and investigate that, then maybe that would be something that would be that resonated with me that we should consider as well. And I'd like to comment on Councillor Winters' point about not overlooking the potential revenue that we may have from this. If it's up, maybe we decommission what we need to, and I am of course in favor of this as well. But if there's an opportunity to bring back revenue to both municipalities, then that might be something that we should consider as well. And I'd be in favor of supporting that. My question to staff is, under the analysis section, the $2 to $2.5 million kind of surprised me as well, but not really. But I'm wondering if there'd be any opportunity, whether it's through grant match or through the province or through the federal government, to recuperate some of those costs. Is there any opportunity to get those costs back without slowing this process down?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, at this time, no, none that I'm aware of. We will certainly engage grant match to look at opportunities that might exist. That would be during that sort of full decommissioning. The 2 to 2.5 million was a number that came up literally just walking around, as if the site was to be taken back to exactly as it was before. Everything underground removed, everything above ground removed, and no value assigned to any potential reuse or site asset, just as a top line number. That number, it should be treated, I hope I caveated it well enough in the report, should be treated purely as a potential maximum sort of dollar value at the end of the day. The report will sketch out, the anticipation of the report is it will sketch out a number of different options for minimal decommissioning to full decommissioning, decommissioning to a certain point of reuse of assets and retaining assets and reusing them. The intention of this report is to plug a gap which staff just simply do not have the expertise on, to look at what the alternative uses of the infrastructure on that site could be, and to share that back with the joint councils to allow for an informed decision about how far down the decommissioning route, if indeed any steps down the decommissioning route, we would go down. And we will continue to fund it.
Yeah, sounds good.
To support both the study.
That was just my thought. Yeah, thank you.
Mayor Mackey?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I just want to respond to Councillor Winters' comments earlier about the potential revenue. I like the sounds of it. I am cautioned based on tales we've been told in the past about potential revenue. There's been too many times we've been told that, and it ends up costing both municipalities a lot of money. But I don't want to dismiss it, out of hand. I'd want to know more about the company and the reputation and what those potentials are. When it comes back to this report and full decommissioning, I completely agree with Rick. I don't believe full decommissioning, taking it back to now what you're referring to as a park-like state is necessary. I envision the electrical components being taken out in the generator, those tanks remaining. Whether there's any good use for those tanks, I don't know, but having to take all that cement down doesn't really make sense to me. So can we maybe reduce the scope of this and get a reduction in cost? The comments around GHD, when I read through the report, they've done most of the work. It's going to be a cut and paste for Aqua unless GHD is involved somehow. So I forget what we paid for that report, but it's pretty comprehensive. And to think that we have to spend upwards of 25,000 per municipality just to kind of get a different name tag on the top of a report. I think there's room to negotiate maybe with Aqua and with GHD. GHD worked in collaboration, with Aqua. So can the same not take place now? Somehow between the two companies, we get the information we want, but maybe we limit the scope without the full decommissioning. If I'm reading the room properly, I'm not hearing anybody that really needs that information. If we're able to get what we want with a partial decommission, that would be the extent of it. Just my thoughts.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, and again, I may rely on my colleagues to either side of me on this one. One of the purposes for at least understanding what a full decommissioning looks like is from an asset retirement obligation perspective and for a risk and liability perspective. If we're not going to retire all the assets, and I tend to agree with you, I suspect that digging pipes out of the ground probably is not worth the cost of doing it for the use of that site in the future. But we should be aware of what the liabilities that might exist after that is done or not done. And that would be part of the reason for at least considering the full decommissioning, to allow the joint councils to make a cost-benefit analysis of, how much do we leave and absorb risk? There is risk, or if there is liability associated to that, how much of that are we prepared to absorb rather than pay the cost of full decommissioning? So the best way of removing all assets, all liabilities, is to remove everything. If you leave some stuff, there will be some liability left. And so it's that balancing act of how much do you want to spend to remove everything and have no more liabilities on the site or more management costs associated to the site or not. And so the way in which staff have asked Aqua to approach this is, on a sliding scale from do nothing to do everything. Where are we best sat to land? Present options for the joint councils to consider, which would weigh into account things such as the sale of any assets that are on there and the adaptive reuse of any of the potential reuse scenarios that would be there.
Deputy Mayor.
So, through you, Aqua, can they estimate how much is left in the tanks? Is that part of their decommissioning? Because I think it's a great idea if we use those tanks, but I imagine some of these companies that want to use the tanks don't want stuff that's in there now.
So through your Mayor Carlton, yes, that's embedded within this study. It is an analysis, a current analysis of what's left in the tanks, both the above ground tanks and the storage tanks, which are below ground and indeed in the building. We still have sanitation.
Through Mayor Carlton, how would they not know what's in there now? When we sat a year ago, I think we talked about the remnants that were in an auger. They were well aware of what was there and what needed to be done. Would they not have known at that point what was in those tanks? Because I don't believe we put anything in since.
Through Mayor Carlton, many of the tanks they do know. So the tank which is in the building, they know what's in it and they know how much is in it. There are several below ground tanks. Again, I'm not the expert on this, but I've done a walkthrough with them and they pointed at holes in the ground and manhole covers and stuff like that. There are tanks in the ground which they, as part of the winterization process, they were backfilled with water from the lagoons. The water that is in, they diluted the waste basically to prevent it from freezing, as I understand it. And so there is material in there which is a mixture of septage and lagoon waste. Some of that may be able to be pumped straight back into the lagoons. They need to do some testing to understand that. As part of the winterization process, there was a material that was pumped into certain sections of the system, which is designed to keep the system in a liquefied state so that it can be reactivated. As I understand it, the work that was done on site by Opera as part of their routine contract with us has identified that as now solidified. And so they have to understand what that wastage is and how much of that there is, because that's an unknown at this point. There are tanks which are open to the elements. And again, those tanks, they did know how much septic waste was in those tanks, and they can fairly easily do a calculation of how much is left in them by the depth and the size of the tanks and so on and so forth. But it has changed since that was done because of the natural elements of precipitation. They also need to do some testing on those materials. The last we spoke to Leo and Aqua, they believe that much of the material, much of the volume of material may be able to be disposed of straight back into the lagoons at minimal cost. But they do need to understand the nature of that material to understand how that will impact the lagoons. We obviously do not want to impact the health and the well-being of the lagoons through that. There was also hope that any of the materials, because of the licenses we have on the site, any of the materials that can't be done there should be able to be hauled out and dried on site as part of that removal, and that would save weight in terms of transport costs off site if needed. So they have some awareness. They need to clarify that awareness through some of this. And again, I'm not speaking about anything I have a great deal of knowledge about.
Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, I guess when I read the report too, there, the 2 to 2.5 million there was, I thought it was a little ridiculous in the price, but I'm not sure how they could come up with that amount of money to do that. I get it costs money to do it, but where I keep coming back to is we've been kicking this around for the 6 years I've been here now. If we're going to be good stewards to the land, we need a full decommission. That's the pipe's got to come out of the ground, put it back to where it was, and we're done. We do a partial decommission. Who knows to say we're not sitting back here in 4 years because something's collapsed, the pipe's collapsed, we got other problems. So there's got to be a happy medium in there between where we full decommission or we partial decommission and what that money looks like. Obviously, it's too far one side that we're not going to do it, but I keep going back to if we're going to be good stewards of the land, we put that land in the back of what it was. That's where we didn't create this mess, but we have this mess. And it's either us that's going to fix it, or we're going to put it off to somebody else to fix it down the road when they will have to dig it out. If we dig the pipes and stuff out of the ground, we should be able to get scrap out of that, if nothing else. So again, I'd like to see us do more as our own townships or whatever to do what we can. I don't know how much we can do. But again, that fine line of where we partially decommission or fully decommission, whatever those numbers are, I believe as good stewards of the land, we've got to do the right thing. Clean it up.
So, sorry. Mayor Carlton. So when they indicated a full decommission, did they mean they were going to bring the lagoon, get rid of the lagoons as well? Okay. Just because we're kind of talking that we would turn this back into the way it was. Well, it didn't used to have lagoons on it either, but.
I think when the biodigester was built, the lagoons were there already.
Yes, they were. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I do think it's important that you have a full report that will give you some options, right? That, there's, as you mentioned, this has been discussed, I've been here 8.5 years and it's been discussed, in terms of the viability. So to be able to make an informed decision and to have that information that's available for your residents as well, that you've carefully considered what the options are and what the cost of those. So when we talk about decommissioning, we don't know at this point in terms of what's required to decommission under the license. What can we do, what can't we do, right? I think you need a full decommissioning report. If you choose to only do portions of it, or as the report has indicated, maybe it's spread over a period of time. Okay? But unless you have that full information, I think it's difficult for councils to make a decision.
Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mayor Colburn. That's the first time I've done that. My apologies. I'll just move on. I just wanted to put some support behind Deputy Mayor Pringle's comments about being good stewards for the land and thinking about both that environmental perspective as well as the cost is hard to swallow and hopefully can be reduced. I also don't want to see that cost just be pushed into the future for future councils and staff and community to deal with. So I think of that comment about a full report that then could be implemented at different points in time to spread the cost out, looking at decommissioning the most risky aspects of the biodigester first would be a wise way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Coburn.
So I don't want to stifle the conversation because it's all good, but it seems to me that the motion before us is, do we accept single sourcing this with Aqua and splitting the cost of the $50,000 plan, and perhaps looking at some negotiating some tighter timelines. And I agree with the CAO that just spoke for Chatsworth. I think that in order to make a good decision, we need to get all that information back. And we can make a decision on full or partial decommissioning when we have all of that information before us. But tonight is about, are we engaging Aqua as a single source consultant for the plan? And are we happy with the cost at 50,000? I feel like we do need to move it on. I would like us to save as much money as we can, but I'm really worried that when we start picking this apart, that it's going to set us back in terms of our timelines. So do we just go ahead with this, or are we asking for another tender to go out?
Thank you for that. And that was something I was going to follow up on, was the timeline. If we want to move this through quicker, if we ask to go back and get a price from GHD, are we moving things on down the road? Because it then has to come back to both joint councils again. So if we want to move things through, do we just go with what's in front of us now? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. I hear, it's tough to get people together, but I think something that this important, we can be online, we can meet here, we can meet, if people want to come to meetings, they'll come to meetings. So I think here we are, folks, we're sitting together, we're hopefully making headroom on this. I think if you have a vested interest in this, we will meet. So I say, Deputy McKay mentioned the end of February. 6 weeks, I think is probably doable. Is it not? Can we not meet at that, look at this and keep moving? Because, if we wait till August, we're just kicking it down the road again. Let's really kind of keep our feet to the fire on this and move forward. And really, GHD's done a lot of the work. I can't imagine it's a long timeline.
Sarah Longley.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, we're at your disposal. I think for us to get a second sole source quote together is definitely feasible within a 6 week sort of timeline. We'll be able to get the quote together a lot quicker than that. We'd have to reach out to Aqua to make sure they were going to continue to hold theirs at the same price point. It wouldn't be enough time for us to do an RFP or the tender process, so we would be having to come back together to receive a sole source direction at that point in time. And it would push the timelines out by 6 weeks. So the hope here was to have information back in time for budget cycles to start. I suspect you're very well aligned with us. Budget 2026 has already started. My hope would be that we need these numbers back by May or June at the very latest. And so we're on a fairly tight timeline. I know it's only January now. We're on a fairly tight timeline already in order to meet that direction, to make sure we get these numbers back before budget. So we are somewhat against the wall, but certainly enough time to go back out. We would have to come back as a joint council to approve a sole source.
So I think what I'm hearing as well is that if we go with what's proposed tonight with Aqua, we're starting that process right now of their report ready to come back late April, early May. If we're looking at going to GHD and asking them for pricing, we're moving things down the road 6 weeks before we come back together to decide who we're awarding it to then start the process. Councillor Gray?
Thank you. I disagree. I think this goes there as quick as it can, and we put that timeline on it for the end of February. These two companies aren't new to this. Both of them are familiar. I don't think we have to put it down the road any longer. I think they should be prepared to go.
I think what I'm saying though is, what I'm hearing is that if we go with Aqua tonight, we're starting the process tonight. Whereas if we're looking at GHD for pricing, we're not starting the process until we have pricing from them. And we're guessing that they would come back in at a similar price to Aqua. So do we want to push it down the road that far, or do we want to start the process tonight? I think is what we're looking at. And if we want to push it down the road, then I need an amendment to the motion that's on the table now.
I have clarification that we'd be pushing it down the road. GHD, and I can't say that they would get the tender or not, have done the majority of the work. We have already received from them a decommissioning report. But we're asking for a decommissioning report with Aqua. So why would we be pushing it down the road anymore? I guess I'm having trouble kind of.
Well, until we have that pricing from GHD, we're not starting the process, is what I'm seeing. And if I'm wrong, if staff think,
So through you, Mayor Carlton, at this point in time, the only quote that we have is from Aqua. If the direction is to go and obtain a second quote from GHD, we can do that. Take some time to get that second quote and then to arrange for a joint council to come back together to approve.
Mayor Mackey?
I would feel more comfortable if we had a quote from GHD. I mean, I recognize it's going to take a little bit of time, but I don't think it has to take a lot of time. The company is well versed in our biodigester in the site. They'll be able to look at their workload and I think in a fairly quick order, determine whether or not they can give us a quote. Really, it's an expression of interest is all we need over the next 2 or 3 days. If they're interested, we give them the time to give us a quote, but we put timeframes on it. You know, we want that within whatever, within the next month. They can do it, I mean, because they've done the work. We're only adding on a little bit to it. My comfort level would be better because I think Aqua's number is high. $10,000 or up to $10,000 to bring in a demolition contractor. That doesn't seems too high, to me for that part of it. So I just, my comfort level would be to find out from GHD whether they're interested or not. And, we can give direction today that we move ahead with whoever is comes in with the best price. I think we all agree that we want the work done. And the scope of the work has been determined. Now it's just a matter of who can do it most cost effectively for it. That's my sense.
Okay. Sorry, and I wasn't meaning to push Aqua. I just wanted everybody to be aware that there's a possibility we're pushing that out further, waiting for that second price to come back in.
Thank you. And I'm not pushing GHD by any means, but they've already done a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's just it. We're gonna pay twice. They've done the work for it.
Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thanks, Mayor Earl. Yeah, and I guess when sitting there listening to it too, if we do go to them and get that second quote, they may already have an opportunity to do something with some of the stuff that's there we don't know about, right? So that just gives us a second advantage. Yeah, we don't want it to take long to happen, but they might have different suggestion on a few things that may help us at the end of the day too. So to get the second opinion for our taxpayers and ourselves to make that decision might be not a bad thing to do.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn?
If Mayor Mackey wants to put a motion on the floor to that effect, that would be great. Otherwise, I will take a stab at it. I would move that we direct staff to approach the other firm, and I don't want to get the acronym wrong, for a single source quote to be provided to us by February 7th. At which time councils will consider both proposals and make a decision. Does that cover it, Scott?
I think that covers it, Kathy. I would second that.
Okay. Staff have got that? Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask our two treasurers. So we already have a report with a single source. If we go to someone else, it's no longer a single source. Will your purchasing policy allow you to get 2 quotes? In ours, we're required to get 3.
Ours does speak to 3 as well. All intentions must be met to try and obtain 3.
Okay.
However, given the niche market associated with this, you could make the argument that the act of getting the 2 that are very specialized in this is you making all intensive purposes of obtaining the minimum 3.
Go ahead, Mayor Mackey.
I'm certainly comfortable, we're talking about 2 companies that do have a good knowledge of our facility. And to go outside of those 2 companies, I think we would be increasing our costs. So I'm okay with the motion that's on the floor and bring it back on February 7th.
I would ask, does February 7th allow enough time?
So do you, Mayor Carlton, I believe that February the 7th would be ample. That shouldn't be beyond the scope of influence. And just for clarity, the timeline was less about the getting the quote, more about getting us back into a room together. And so I've heard a commitment that that will happen come what may, and so we can work towards that February 7th date without a shadow of a doubt. I think there was a quick conversation there, correct me if I'm speaking out of turn. If Councillor Coburn is open to amending her amendment to use the word request for quote rather than socials, I think that would be a more accurate articulation where we're sitting at this point.
Councillor Coburn?
That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson?
It was just pointed out that February 7th is a Friday. Is that a good day to ask for? That's fine. Okay.
So then we would be looking at a joint council meeting in some form the following week.
Yes.
That'll be what, the 10th of February then? Yeah, so we'd be looking at February 10th.
Same time.
Councillor Coburn, sorry. Got a bit going on here.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I guess I'm just wondering if we get the second quote. We're all on the same page. We want this done quickly. We want it done at a reasonable price. Is that not a decision our board can make on our behalf, or does that have to come back to both councils in whole?
I am CAO Cinnamon.
The original motion was to bring it to the joint board.
So that's what we've been doing all along.
I'm sorry, to the joint councils.
Joint councils, yes. So we've been doing that all along. We should carry on with that. Okay, so Carly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. For you, from an agenda perspective, if we get the quotations on February 7th, the 10th doesn't give me any time to publish an agenda or gather any materials. So I would recommend that the meeting be pushed out further at minimum to the later end of that week, if not the week following, to allow time for staff to draft a report and then for myself to publish the agenda.
So we'd be looking at 13th or 14th. Would be the following Thursday, Friday. Councillor Gregg and then Mayor Mackey.
Thank you. Well, we actually didn't get a report until Friday, was it Thursday or Friday for this one? So it's not like we could have a placeholder for the meeting and the information comes prior to the meeting, the day or two ago, same as this. Is that not possible?
Through you, if the deadline is on the 7th, that's a Friday, and if we receive it, at the end of the day, I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays, unfortunately, and so putting the agenda together would be a little bit of a challenge for me. But I'm more than happy to see it happen at the later half of that week, so that on Monday I could put the agenda together and get it to the joint councils.
And thank you, just to I was thinking the Monday was pretty quick for you too. I was thinking Tuesday would give you staff time to kind of really go over things and take a look and do what you do. Yeah, but I think we're just looking for the sooner the better.
Comment, Scott?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I'm wondering if the mover would amend the date from the, Niles said that there was ample time.
Oh.
So just going on that ample time, can we move from the 7th back to the 3rd, which is the Monday, and then the following Monday, which is the 10th, we would have our meeting. And that would give Carly time to do it, and we're not changing our timelines.
I'm happy to move the date to the 3rd of February.
Even putting it in at the 5th, the Wednesday, allow time for staff to get.
I think you're worrying about somebody else's problem. In the private sector, if you set the date and they're interested, they will make it work.
Yeah.
You've got two companies that are actively involved in this that probably have all of the information they need. They're not starting from scratch. I think to argue over whether it's the Monday, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, Thursday is a waste of our time. Pick a date, tell us what it is, and we move forward.
If you want it, be there.
Yep. We haven't totally settled it. Go ahead, CEO Longley.
So, through you, Mayor Carlton, we could make the third, I'm never going to open my mouth again, we could make the third work. We could make the third work for this. We were having a very quick sidebar. There is another way you could move this one quicker. If you provided direction for an upset limit of 50,000 to go with whichever is the cheaper of the two, we could actually we wouldn't need to come back together with joint council.
What does
I think we broadly agreed, if we've broadly got the scope of this decommissioning right, is that what we want to see is options from do nothing to do everything, and a recommendation in between that balances the use of any existing liabilities and explores other uses of the licenses. We want a report which is going to do that and articulate that. If all we're meeting to do is award this to the lowest price of two people, and you're okay with the price which is in front of you, if we go no higher than the number in here and were to award to the lowest of the two, that would be a way of us avoiding needing to then reschedule a second meeting.
I agree if that's the only reason that we're going to get together, but over the last year, the board hasn't been meeting.
No.
We haven't, and whether or not the board continues to meet or whether we're going to meet with the two councils, that's for everyone here to decide. But we haven't seen a budget. You know, we should be looking at a budget. So there would be more reason than just approving a lowest quote if we wanted to make that, you know. And I think there is interest from all members or most members of council in regards to this because it has been going on so long. So I think we should, you know, put our head down, and I'm fine with both councils meeting if it's if members are okay with it. But we look at the budget. There's other conversations that need to be had. You know, we talked because, you know, we go a year ago since we talked. There was discussion at that time about the contract, and you know, we've had lots of discussions about the fairness of the contract, and those need to continue. It'd be nice that both councils had those discussions. So I would be in favor of continuing to meet on a basis that makes sense, that we have things to discuss so that we can move this process along. So.
CEO Cinnamon.
So I believe that the budget has to go to the joint board and then they make a recommendation back to council. So if we want to have a meeting of the joint board, we can certainly have some discussion with staff about arranging that. But in terms of moving the quote forward and starting the process of a report, I do like Niall's suggestion to give us direction or approval to move forward with the best price that we obtain between Aqua and GHD.
I'm fine with that piece of it. I just don't want to lose sight that both councils, I think, need to be meeting in regards to the biodigester for more than just this pricing. Mm-hmm. And what that timing should look like, I'll leave it to, I guess, our CEOs, but there are lots of other things that we need to, at some point, start discussing. And it's really not just the board. It's a duplication for the board to do it when I think all of council needs to hear those discussions.
Yep. CEO Longley.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, just briefly again, I'm not wishing to confuse the conversation, but the joint councils could give the bio board direction to approve. If you're not happy with the approving to an upset limit and then going with the cheapest, you could provide direction to the biogrid board members to approve a potential decommissioning contract. And then we could wrap that in, as you say, to a biogrid board budget meeting, which would then go back to the joint councils after the fact. So we would have some oversight by members around the table, and then there'd be a report back to council in due course.
Councillor Winters.
I like that suggestion, but where I was going with it is we've been saying and repeating over and over again what one price is from one of the proponents of doing this. In all fairness, the price is out there, so you can't evaluate price to price. There has to be more, and what is the time frame? It's a matter of going back to Aqua and saying, board's throwing it back, council's throwing it back, you know, reevaluate price, we want a definite time frame. GHD, we want a proposal, we want a time frame. We can't do this just based on price, or it's not open and fair and transparent. But I'm okay saying, you know, as a council member saying, I agree that the board can make that decision. But I think you need to look at more than just price on this, where it's not fair and transparent.
Deputy Mayor.
No, thanks, Mark Carlton. Yeah, and there's agreement there too that I don't want to say, yeah, we'll take the cheapest price out there because we may get nothing for $1.25 million, right? Like it's just, we could get a whole lot of nothing out of it. So I do believe we need to see the comparators on where we're going to really get for our money and evaluate from there.
Okay, I am going to turn to the clerk for what motion do we have on the floor right now?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, the amendment that was on the floor spoke to engaging GHD as well, and there was that specific timeline that had been proposed as well. I don't believe the motion, the vote was called on that motion.
No.
So if there was any desire to withdraw that or to vote on it, pass it, defeat it, great. Alternatively, based on the discussion, if that amendment was withdrawn, we could put another amendment on the floor to direct staff to engage Aqua and GHD to prepare those proposals, and that the board would evaluate them. Is that the direction that we're heading? So the first paragraph could be amended to read that staff be directed to engage Aqua and GHD to prepare proposals for a full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan for review of the BioGrid Joint Management Board.
Okay, so is that the one we have on the floor, the proposed one? So Councillor Coburn.
That's certainly not the one I proposed, and I'm confused as to the staff recommendation that the motion read that we would re-engage Aqua. I have to assume that the quote they gave us is their best rate. So I'm really not sure why we would be engaging them again. Perhaps they could clarify that for me. But no, that wasn't my motion at all. So I'm feeling confused.
Okay,
Perhaps
I'm going to go to the clerk on this for some clarification.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, as I mentioned, the amendment that was placed on the floor, which was moved and seconded, that has not yet been voted on, was the original amendment that proposed that we engage GHD and that we asked them to bring that report back to us by February 3rd, and that it be brought back to the joint councils. So that is what is currently on the floor.
And I think subsequent to that, discussion has somewhat maybe changed what we would like to do. So, Mayor Mackey.
I support that original motion as the seconder and would like to call the question on that motion.
Councillor Thomas.
Does the actual resolution be read back? What it actually says?
The original resolution or the amended one?
The amendment that Councillor Coburn had brought forward and seconded by Mayor Mackey.
Mayor Mackey, yes. You got the original one there. For those of you online, we're just waiting for the clerk to get back to that First Amendment.
If I may, Mayor Carlton, I don't necessarily see that second motion as an amendment at all. I think in my opinion, we ought to be voting on the original motion. It doesn't seem like an amendment to me. It seems like a whole different motion.
I think we don't want to go back to the original motion until we voted on the amendment, because the original motion is directing to engage Aqua. So we want the amendment. Have you got that now, Carla?
Yes, thank you, through you. So the amended motion reads that staff be directed to engage in an informal quotation process with Aqua and GHD for preparing a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, and that the report be provided to staff for review of the joint councils by February 3rd, 2025.
Councillor Coburn?
I'm sorry, did I hear the word informal, or I may have misheard?
CEO Lovely?
To you, Mayor Carlton, no, you didn't mishear Councillor Coburn. Informal quotation as a process of us reaching out. It's one of the mechanisms, one of the tools within the procurement bylaw is the informal quotation process.
The word sole source had been used originally, but if we're reaching out to two different companies, then we're not doing sole source. Any further questions on that, or can I call the vote now? Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Like, we're almost getting there, but I have to ask a question. If we ask for a full, a report on a full decommissioning, do we lose what Councillor Rick has asked for? Or are we doing it in stages? Do we lose that? No, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor on the amended motion? That is carried. And I'm turning to the clerk. We have to go back to the original motion and.
As the original motion as amended.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion as amended. All in favor?
I don't understand what that means.
Okay,
The original motion,
we have now amended, so, but we have to go back and vote on that original motion because it's on the floor.
but are they
But
not two
what-
separate resolutions, is what I believe? Because there were a mover and a seconder for the original resolution. And then we have, Councillor Coburn has proposed a new resolution, which has passed.
An amendment to the original motion has been passed.
So we still have to vote on the original motion, but it's the amendment that's carrying force.
But the original motion indicates that we're sole sourcing to Aqua.
But it's been amended by the amendment to be different than that.
So none of this original resolution is what we're looking at passing that now.
Through you, the first paragraph of the original motion has been amended to remove sole sourcing and to insert the informal quotation process. But the remainder of the original motion remains, save and except for the first paragraph as amended.
Let me just read what the rest of the resolution says then.
Mayor Carlton, if it would assist, we can read the motion in its entirety as amended,
Okay,
if that would assist.
let's have that.
Okay.
So the first paragraph has been amended. the second paragraph can stand.
Right. Because we don't know what that amount is.
They can't vote and say,
Why don't we just defeat the original?
What happens if we just defeat the original? I-
I hate to contradict him. I think the appropriate thing is to defeat the original.
Yes.
It's not really an amendment, to be honest. I think you need to defeat it because it's got two
Yeah.
significant things. One is sole sourcing, and the second thing is the amount. You're not approving the amount. I think it's easier to defeat it and then introduce a secondary motion.
Okay, so we're back to the main list.
So then that secondary motion would contain a substantial amount of, half of paragraph 2 potentially, and then paragraph 3, 4, and 5 of the original resolution.
Let's defeat that motion and then get a brand new one in place. Let's just get rid of it and start brand new with a second motion. So I will call the vote on the original motion. All in favor? All opposed? That is defeated. Okay, now let's figure out what the next motion is that we want to have in place.
Basically, what Carly read out off as the amended, which is now becoming a motion and Kathy seconded.
But we still have some pieces of that original motion.
We don't need that in there. Sorry.
That's okay.
I don't think we need that in there. We just want to go to GHG, have them bring back a price by the 3rd of February. If they choose not to, then we know where we're at, and then we meet again here on the 10th. That's,
Okay.
I think, what we want.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, paragraphs 3, 4, and 5 do articulate quite well some of the conversation Councillor Winters and others had around making sure that this is a something to full decommissioning and not one or the other. So there may be value. I recognise I'm not the person that's putting this on the floor, but paragraphs, the one that starts that through the development of, that start be directed to explore and that start be directed to bring. Those 3 paragraphs articulate some of the conversation around the desire for this being something which talks about do nothing to do everything and where might be good in between. So there might be some value to maintaining those if whoever places this motion on the floor is open to it.
So let me read those 3 paragraphs. Councillor Coburn, I'll come to you once I've read this so we can figure out this next step. That through the development of a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, a detailed review of the existing licenses and regulatory approvals on the property is completed to inform if there is potential alternative uses for the property under said licenses, and that staff be directed to explore through the decommissioning plan potential alternative uses for the site and assets associated with the biodigester and under the existing approved and licensed uses, and that staff be directed to bring before the joint council prior to budget 2026 processes a recommended approach to decommissioning. That would be our next motion.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I would also eliminate that last paragraph. Yes.
Eliminate the last part about budget.
So through you, that staff be directed to engage in an informal quotation process with Aqua and GHD for preparing a biodigester full decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, and that the report be provided to staff for review of the joint councils by February 3rd, 2025, and that through the development of a biodigester decommissioning and site rehabilitation plan, a detailed review of the existing licenses and regulatory approvals on the property is completed to inform if there is potential alternative uses for the property under said licenses, and that staff be directed to explore through the decommissioning plan the potential alternative uses for the site and assets associated with the biodigester and under the existing and approved license uses.
Okay. Councillor Coburn?
I don't love the word informal. The proposal we got from Aqua was anything but informal. We're asking for a second quote, and I don't understand why we're going back to engage with Aqua. We've got their quote, we've got their report. Simply, all we're asking for is a second quote from a second source. And again, I'm confused as to why we're muddying the waters by saying that you're going to be going back to Aqua to have an informal discussion with them. That wasn't my motion, and I'm opposed to that wording, unless you can convince me otherwise.
Okay, so this is getting to a second motion here, not the one that you had originally made that we voted on. CAO Lovely.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I hope I can put your mind at rest here. Informal quotation isn't an informal process at all. It's a process which is guided by our procurement policy. And so informal quotations has a definition associated to it in the procurement process. What results from an informal quotation will be very similar to what we've seen from Aqua. It will be a breakdown of timelines, content of reports, and everything else like that. So the words informal quotation are on the same scale as a quote, informal quotation, RFP, tender, and so on and so forth. Each has definitions within the procurement and purchasing bylaw. So it's not an informal process. It's a process backed by policy. The reason we have to go back to Aqua is that Aqua were asked to provide pricing under the guise of a sole source. They may well wish to adjust their prices under an informal quotation. They were not asked to provide an informal quotation the first time, and so they may wish to sharpen their pencils and be keener. They may wish to price themselves out, so we don't want to do this anymore because they know who their competition is, because it's now a matter of public record who else we're going to be asking. So there is no guarantee we come back with a cheaper price in a few weeks, because the price that you see today is gone today, potentially. But we do need to go back to both now to allow for that fairness under the informal quotation process.
So
Thank you,
Mayor Carlton, and through you to CAO Lovely. So the process will remain unadulterated, though, in that you'll re-engage Aqua, but the quotes, the bids will remain confidential until such time as they're presented publicly. Is that correct?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, what will happen tomorrow, if the conversation that I think is panning out is going to go, is I will sit down tomorrow and I will draft an informal quotation document which will clearly speculate what we are requiring back from the two people we're going to approach for this body of work to provide us. That will be price, timeline, broad nature of the project that we're looking to articulate. I will share that promptly with my colleagues in Chatsworth and within the township for a review. We will then issue that to both vendors. Both vendors will then share feedback back to us. The feedback that comes back to staff will then be crafted into a report, which at this point will be coming back from joint councils at some point after the 3rd of February, as soon as we're able to logically get a meeting together, and you will get that feedback back. There will be no discussion backwards and forwards with either one of the two vendors after they have provided the response. That would be inappropriate. So the response they provide us will be treated in confidentiality, will not be discussed with either one of the proponents once it's been received by staff, and they will hear back only after we have received direction from the joint councils at that meeting, in the same way as we would undertake a tender process or an RFP process.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? Which we have actually not got a mover and seconder for yet, so we've been discussing it ahead of time. Mayor Mackey, you're moving?
Yeah, or Kathy, I think it's in her originally. Yeah.
Well, we're actually on to another motion, so Councillor Coburn?
It's in the, what I want.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And a seconder then. Mayor Mackey? Any further discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The only thing left is our confirming bylaw here. Yes, go ahead.
I didn't want to bring this up and confuse this in the depth of those discussions with that motion. But I understand that just either Friday or today, there was correspondence from a company that maybe Councillor Winters referenced, expressing some interest. Just wondering if that could be confirmed for everyone's benefit. And if so, do we, and when I say we, do staff start that conversation, or is it put on hold until we make a decision on the consultants?
Go ahead, Nadia. Happy to speak to it. So yes, just either late Thursday, I think it was, we did receive an email from a company who is potentially interested in the storage tanks. The motion that you actually have before you will cover that off. We met with him several months ago, but didn't hear anything back. I suspect that, they're aware that this motion is coming forward, and so there was no pricing, it was just that they'd like to explore it further. So we will certainly be doing that.
But I guess that's my question. Do our senior staff do the exploring, or is this the consultant company that we hire do that exploring? I don't want to lose sight of a company reaching out, so I think my preference would be at least some initial discussions between the townships and that company to get a little bit more information for all of us, but I'm not sure where others are sitting.
Go ahead.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the consultant would not be reaching out to any company. The consultant that we're seeking to engage through this work will simply be looking to see if the use that is proposed or any other use that's not yet considered might be able to be compliant with the licensing that's on the site, and what, if anything, we might need to do to make sure that's compliant. There's nothing to prevent us having a conversation with somebody like that, but I think it's fair to say that that the decision to move forward with any future use of that site is not one that sits with staff. That very much sits in the hands of council, with an understanding of what the potential positive impacts could be, an understanding of what the potential negative impacts could be, what that use looks like, what the revenue could be, and indeed whether or not you wish us to seek to explore if there are other providers other businesses that might have uses for that site. Because we've only explored the use of the biodigester to date. We were able to entertain this conversation because this individual had participated in that tendering process and so had been invited to share ideas with us. So we were able to hear from them. We've gone no further in terms of exploring what that opportunity could look like. The engagement of this work will say whether or not that is indeed feasible on that site. There would then be obviously a robust process to go through to understand what that looks like, and joint council providing direction if a future use is desirable.
Not so anyone's scratching their head. This that has nothing to do with the biodigester. It has to do with what Rick was talking about and the storage tanks. So not to raise anyone's aware that the biodigester is being resurrected.
No, but that has to fit within the current licensing on that site first, so.
Appreciate it.
And we'll find that. Go ahead.
We haven't seen a 2024 budget yet through the board. Is that coming anytime soon? So that
Just need a board meeting.
even better. Okay, thank you.
And you said 2024 budget to.
24 budget. Yeah, and it shows the importance of meeting.
It could go through the board, but instead of that, if we were going to meet on the 10th, I think was the date that was kind of thrown out, February 10th, would that give you time, Samantha, to bring the budget in front of both councils?
I'd have to go back and look at the board's terms of reference, because I believe it does say that the budget must be presented to the board. That's my only hiccup.
The members of that joint board will be here as well. We could end the joint meeting and have a bio-grid meeting on the exact same day. Just switch.
Yeah. Or the
switch gears halfway.
Members of that joint board meet half an hour ahead to look at that, and then we meet as the combined councils.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want, I think it would be nice, you know, if we get a little momentum going with all members of council, so there's no secrets, and not that there ever was any secrets, but the amount of information that gets shared, sometimes things get missed, and if everyone's here and fully participating, I think it's a good way to move this process forward with the biodigester. Thanks.
Yep. Go ahead. One of my questions with regard to the budget from 2024 is, so the biodigester hasn't been running for quite a few years. Are we paying the same amount to Aqua? Like, it's gotta be less work than it was initially.
So through you, as part of the winterization, the fee did decrease. I don't have the exact amount. I believe it was 4,200-ish each month. So it has definitely decreased from when the biodigester was operating.
And how much was it when the biodigester was running?
8,000.
Double?
At
Okay.
least.
So there maybe is a surplus potentially.
So the financials from the board in 2022 did have a surplus. However, there was a carry forward operating deficit, which that surplus was applied against. Looking at 2024's information, we are projecting a surplus again, in the tune of, bear with me for one moment.
Well, that can all come back. It's not an emergency today. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I just was thinking that could be a component of what comes back to either the joint board or the joint councils. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Deputy Mayor McKay?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, because we're talking about surplus. I think in 2023, there was surplus of 44,000. So
Good.
hopefully that isn't all spent if our monthly went down. But once we see the budget.
Okay. Any other items? Have a confirming bylaw to read. So the recommendation that bylaw number 2025-01, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting on January 13th, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation of the Township of Georgian Bluffs, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Deputy Mayor McKay. All in favor? Is carried. I only need one more motion, and that's to adjourn. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Witt, Councillor Sholday, all in favor? That